Hello, and thank you for joining us for Facing Cancer as a Young Woman. This session will discuss strategies to deal with the unique set of challenges faced by young women with ovarian cancer. The speaker for this session is Sarah Paul. Sarah is the Social Work Senior Program Director at CancerCare. You can view her full bio in the downloadable conference program. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah, and I will turn it over to you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Paul, and I'm the Social Work Senior Program Director at CancerCare. I've been here for a little over 6 years, and I specialize in working with young adults affected by cancer. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about ovarian cancer and some issues that directly impact the young adult population. While I'd much rather be in person talking to you all, it's really great to have this opportunity. So there is a lot of content to get through today, so keep in mind that this information just scratches the surface. So here we go. Approximately 2,200 women are diagnosed with ovarian cancer each year. Now, many of you know that 50% of these diagnosed are usually ages 63 and older. But there is a small percentage, about 12%, of those diagnosed that are under the age of 40. So you'll see at this graph, most of the women under 40 is a small percentage. That's because it is rare to be diagnosed with ovarian cancer so young, but it does bring a lot of challenges that many don't expect. So what about this 12%? So again, while most women diagnosed with ovarian cancer are postmenopausal, there's still a large number of young adults, and for the purpose of this presentation, young adults will be ages 20 to 39, and there are some women that are in this group that are diagnosed every year. So young adults face a variety of challenges that are specific to their age group, and these include, but are not limited to, dating concerns, body image, low self-esteem, sex and intimacy concerns, fertility preservation, family planning, and increased feelings of isolation. Now, it's important to note that these challenges can impact one's identity and sense of self during and after cancer treatment. So let's talk a little bit about dating and disclosure. Now, you'll see that many of the topics that I address today are interconnected and they impact one another. But we know that dating is a really important part of being a young adult, especially those that are hoping to find a partner or start a family of their own. Now, dating during a cancer diagnosis can be challenging, but it is a personalized experience, so do your best not to, compare your own experience to someone else, even if they have ovarian cancer and are also a young adult. So, some of the more obvious challenges include feeling unattractive, worrying about physical changes, concerns about not being a good enough partner, and this is sometimes connected to fertility, worries about how others will react to finding out about your diagnosis, concerns for the future, and loss of identity or sense of self. I often hear this from my clients. I just started dating again. When do I tell my partner about my cancer diagnosis? So, another thing to keep in mind is that disclosure of any kind, but specifically when dealing with dating and finding a partner, is incredibly personalized and it is individualized. It's your own choice. So remember that while your diagnosis may be a part of your story right now as an individual, it's not all you are. You're more than just your cancer diagnosis, and you may have a lot more to share about who you are and your personal history. Some may feel that it's best to disclose at the start of a relationship, and some feel that they need to develop a stronger sense of self and trust before disclosing. There really is no right or wrong way to disclose, but it is important to not wait too long. So let's talk a little bit more about, how someone decides earlier on to disclose. It really is more about how it relates to their own personal history and their own sense of self. Some feel that it's a really important part of their life that they want to share, and that is part of the trusting foundation when meeting a partner or starting to date again. But some feel that they want to wait for others to get to know them, get to know their true personality before disclosing such private information. The only thing to really keep in mind is that if you do wait too long, you run into, the risk of starting a relationship with a sense of distrust. It's really important that when you do disclose that you understand your own treatment history and your own history about, what the long-term side effects may be, because when you do disclose comes a possibility of questions about your experience and about what may happen for the future, and that can be really stressful. So it's really important to take some time to reflect on the following questions below, especially when you're thinking about starting to date again and what challenges may be in your way. So, has your experience with a cancer diagnosis changed what you're looking for in a partner? It might seem obvious, and this might seem like a silly question, but oftentimes these different hardships and challenges will change our perspective of not only how we see ourselves, but how we see other people around us, including potential partners. And if you view your diagnosis as a setback, and I'm really talking about in the dating world because some feel that it is, could you consider that regardless of human imperfection, all of us are worthy of love? Now, I know that seems a little existential, but if you're really thinking about what the cancer diagnosis would mean to you and how it would shape your own perspective, there are many other people in this world that have had hardships that have shaped their worldview and their perspective of how they see themselves. So, the hope is that understanding all of these different levels of hardship will give us a better understanding of who we are and what we're looking for. Now, with disclosure and dating and sex and intimacy comes also issues with body image and self esteem. I often hear from my clients, I don't feel attractive anymore. It's really difficult when you're thinking about the different side effects that you can go through and the different pieces of your identity that you can lose. For example, losing your hair or losing your breasts or getting surgery, losing reproductive organs. I mean, all of these things really attribute to how we see ourselves. So it would be normal to feel a certain strong reaction to having a abrupt change in this. So whether you are in treatment or post treatment, it's normal to experience these fluctuations in self esteem and body image. Cancer treatment can impact more than just the physical aspects of the body, as we know, but it can also relate to how we see ourselves sexually. Now, when we're talking about improving body image, it's really important to first talk about it, okay? Don't be afraid to talk about this. Have you spoken to a counselor? Have you joined a support group? Found a peer mentor? Many times when we increase our support system, we can improve all these negative thoughts that relate to body image, self esteem, and how we see ourselves. Another thing to keep in mind is what makes you feel beautiful. I'm not necessarily talking about physical beauty, although that is the obvious, but more so that your inner beauty and your inner self. I would like you to try to, especially if you're struggling with body image, write down a list of qualities that you like about yourself that really have nothing to do with your physical self. Would you describe yourself as kind, compassionate, smart, funny, empathetic, sensitive, understanding? The list goes on. So many qualities that have really nothing to do with who we are on the outside, but more so who we are on the inside. And tied into that, it's really important that we love ourselves first, that we see ourselves as worthy of love and worthy of change, positive change, and all of these things kind of encompass what it means to have positive self esteem, have positive body image. And, if you struggle with that, you can try other things as well. There are these opportunities for, makeover classes or beauty classes that prior to COVID-19 were in person, but have now transitioned to a virtual setting. So while it seems a little silly to join a virtual class learning how to put on makeup, you'd be surprised. Sometimes just learning a new technique like filling in your brows or learning new eye makeup or contour can really improve your sense of self and positive body image and something that you can keep using every day. And now we do know that body image and sex and sexual intimacy go hand in hand. I know that I probably will sound a bit redundant in this presentation, but I really, really want to emphasize the importance of the interconnectedness of all of these factors that really impact young adults, especially young adults diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So, it does go without saying that body image and sexual esteem go hand in hand. If you don't know what sexual esteem is, it's very similar to self esteem, except in a sexual setting. So it's really how you view your sexual self with a partner, with an intimate partner. Now, treatment side effects and post treatment long term effects do have a direct impact on sexual function and sexual esteem. Many women in treatment or post treatment for ovarian cancer tend to experience painful intercourse or other side effects that diminish sexual pleasure. Now, if you are sitting and listening and this is the first time that you're hearing about this, well, just hang in there because there are some tips and things to keep in mind as you move forward working through this. So, whether you are single and dating or partnered, changes in sexual intimacy can have a large impact on your ability to feel safe and secure in a relationship. And painful sex is directly linked to a decrease in desire or sexual libido. And I know that again sounds like an obvious statement, but think about, you've started to have sex, it's immediately painful. So, of course, when you think about sex, you're going to associate sex and pain, which can also, increase symptoms of anxiety. And it tends to be a vicious cycle. And, many couples, even those that are not impacted by cancer, have a challenging time talking openly about sex and intimacy because it often comes with negative connotations. But it doesn't have to be that way. And, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the importance of not only talking to your doctors and your medical team, but also talking to your partner as well. So let's go ahead and talk about, talking about sex with your medical team. Communication is the key. You know, a lot of times you might think, oh, I don't want to bring up this issue because it's uncomfortable and sex is a taboo topic. But it's really important to kind of throw that idea out the window, at least for now, because research shows that patients are less likely to address sexual concerns with their medical team out of fear of making their doctor uncomfortable. Now, it's really important to keep in mind that while it is their job to make sure they're addressing the whole person and not just, your cancer needs, it's also your responsibility to be an advocate for yourself and talk about some of the symptoms that you're experiencing. And really, if you think about it, this is also the safest way to treat any of these symptoms relating to sexual dysfunction as a result of treatment. And some of these symptoms include, vaginal dryness, painful intercourse, anxiety related to intercourse, oftentimes, difficulty reaching orgasm, or decreased sensation. Now, after you talk to your doctor, let's say, you go in for your post-treatment follow-up, you're experiencing some of these side effects, and your medical team is listening, and they say, okay, we're going to try X, Y, and Z to try to alleviate some of these symptoms. So once you start feeling better about some of your symptoms, the next step is to either talk to, your potential partner or your partner about some of the things that you're experiencing. So, whether you're single or partnered, it is important for you to decide what you're comfortable with in terms of sexual intimacy. Start out by setting boundaries around sexual activity and intimacy and knowing what feels good and what doesn't. This doesn't only apply to sexual things necessarily. If you think about joy and pleasure in general, you really need to decide first what makes you feel good overall. It could be something as simple as, a cool pillowcase when you're hot or a warm towel after a shower, right? These small pleasurable moments really give us insight to the other things that we might like, whether that be in a sexual capacity or not. So it's really important to do a little bit of reflecting on what is enjoyable for you and what brings you joy. So, also give yourself permission to express concerns surrounding sex and intimacy to your partner or your potential partner. And the reason I say give yourself permission is because I've mentioned before, sex tends to be a taboo topic. It's stigmatized, people don't want to hear about it. It makes them feel uncomfortable. But, the other side of this is that actually bringing light to some of these concerns opens up opportunities for you to start feeling better about yourself and your experience. And by not talking about these things, then so many people feel more isolated and put in the dark, and they're feeling like that no one understands what they're going through, and that's what we want to try to avoid. So keep in mind that even without the addition of a cancer experience, sexuality and intimacy will ebb and flow throughout the lifetime of a relationship. It's really important to acknowledge this because many people think the only reason I'm having issues with my partner is because I had cancer. Now, that's not necessarily true, but we know that it can lead to increased challenges, which makes it a little bit more difficult to connect. But it's really important to also acknowledge that intercourse is not the only way to give and receive pleasure, especially, when experiencing changes in sexuality and intimacy, we really need to think outside the box. There are several different ways to, you know, express and increase intimacy that really don't involve intercourse. And so I just want to spend a little bit more time talking about this because usually when I bring this up, people are like, I can't think of anything that's going to help me and my partner feel intimate. And sometimes, it takes a silly suggestion to really increase those feelings of intimacy. And I'm just going to go through some of them now. So, my first suggestion would be spend some time cuddling with your partner. Feeling the embrace of a loved one or someone that you care about can really increase feelings of intimacy. I would say skip the sex and just go straight to the cuddling to see if you can bring a feeling of closeness to you and your partner. You can also engage in more serious conversations, talk about what's important. Remember that more serious conversations can increase feelings of intimacy because you're talking about the things that matter most. You can discuss plans for the future or life goals, values, some of the more serious conversations that we don't always get to have. Another tip is try something new. And while this is a little bit more difficult during the pandemic, it's not impossible. Trying a new experience together can really bring a sense of vulnerability that does tend to increase intimacy. It's just building on experiences that you might have not had you not tried this, right? Here's another one, dancing together. For those that, that might have made you cringe, that suggestion, it could be silly and fast, or it could be serious and slow. But, dancing with your partner, holding each other close can really help with feelings of intimacy, even if it feels silly to begin with. Another tip is to sleep together. No, I'm not talking about sex, obviously. Just sleeping with your partner, holding them close. It's built on trust. And even just the simple act of sleeping next to someone that you love and care about can really increase feelings of intimacy. So keep that in mind. You can also give each other a massage. And again, some of these may seem like foreplay. And if that happens to be the case, wonderful. But if not, keep in mind that we really want to set our expectations a little bit low as we're building up a sense of intimacy with one another. So giving each other massage, it could be with or without clothes, and really just focusing on, de-stressing your partner and making them feel good in a different way. You can also cook together. Creating a meal can really show where each other's strengths are. And that sense of teamwork can also increase feelings of intimacy. And my last suggestion would be focus on just kissing. I know it seems, very high schoolish, but keep your clothes on and enjoy the thrill of just kissing and expecting nothing more. That really can help with intimacy as well. So, along with sex and intimacy comes the more difficult conversations about fertility. I want to recognize that this is a difficult and triggering conversation for some, and keep in mind that just the information that I share here today is not all of the information that exists. It's just really a jumpstart on, getting a little bit of a deeper dive into this topic. Okay. So, for women diagnosed with ovarian cancer, fertility preservation is an immediate concern. Now, many of you know this already, but I just, want to go over it a little bit. Any fertility preservation procedures must happen before the treatment even begins. Now, for some, and again, I'm going to go into this a little bit deeper, but for some, that means you find out that you've been diagnosed and surgery is scheduled for the next week or a couple of days, or you must start chemo immediately. You know, in that in that time frame, you might not be able to engage in fertility preservation, and I realize that. Okay. Fertility is often unknown throughout treatment, and many women struggle with this uncertainty. Oftentimes, we're not able to tell if someone's infertile just from one type of chemo or one smaller surgery. And sometimes we have to wait until after in the post-treatment phase to see if fertility is even an option. If you're newly diagnosed and your medical team has not yet brought up the topic of fertility, and again, I'm talking about has you have not started treatment yet, you can always advocate for yourself by initiating this conversation. It's really important to be prepared and to gather a list of questions to ask your medical team. And it's also important to maintain an open and honest communication with your healthcare team in order to receive the best care possible. Now, some people might have a difficult time coming up with questions to ask their medical team. So I'm just going to go over a few questions that might be helpful. Okay. Um, you know, will my treatment plan affect my fertility? If so, will this treatment affect my fertility short term or long term? Now, some of these questions might seem a bit obvious, but I know that creating a list of questions for your doctor can be really overwhelming. So I'm going to keep it simple. If my treatment affects my fertility, what possible solutions are covered by my insurance? And what steps do I need to take before starting treatment? Should I talk to a fertility specialist? If so, can you recommend one? When can I start trying to conceive after my treatment is finished? It's important to maintain this open and honest communication because you want to keep in mind what your options are after treatment, if there are any. While some dread the initial conversation with their medical team, others dread talking to their potential or current partners. So, sometimes the conversation will be more so, directed to your medical team if you're talking about options and different things that you may be at risk for. And some people really dread talking to their partners. That could be someone that they've been dating not for a long time, or maybe someone they've been married to, because it really comes with a lot of heavy conversations. So, for young women with ovarian cancer, the conversation about fertility can cause some extreme emotional distress and anxiety. This conversation often has negative connotations, but it doesn't really need to be this way. Reframe the conversation as a fertility talk, right, instead of a fertility conversation, may be a good first step. So keep in mind that this conversation, it's not only for those that are in serious relationships, because you can honestly have this conversation with anybody. Anyone who is comfortable discussing this topic, this could also be a really good step for someone that's in a budding relationship, only because it really shows what the intentions are of your potential partner and how far they're willing to go to understand your experience. And remember that this is not necessarily like a one time talk. The first talk may be the hardest, but an ongoing open dialogue will prove to be the most helpful in the long run, especially if there are ongoing concerns. Now, here are some tips for talking to your potential or current partner about fertility. Again, some of these may seem obvious or straightforward, but it's really important to remember that even the simplest of techniques can really help. So, the first would be using I statements to express how you feel. Now, that usually means saying, I am dot, 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 or I am feeling dot, dot, dot. So, an example of this could be I am feeling anxious that after treatment, I won't be able to have a child. Can we talk about this? And maybe the question won't sound like that. It could be something more serious in terms of, you've already found out that you're unable to have a child and you're afraid of how your partner might react. That's okay. The point is taking that step to even just opening the conversation to come up with a plan together. I would suggest asking questions, doing research, and staying informed. They say sometimes too much information, can be especially overwhelming. I also believe that in this particular situation, knowledge is power. It's important to stay informed about what your options are. Invite your partner to appointments so they can stay involved and ask their own questions so that they can understand your experience as well. Now, guilt is very normal. Many women feel a sense of guilt when discussing fertility challenges because they might think that they're holding their partner back from having biological children if fertility preservation or conceiving naturally isn't an option. So it's really important to speak openly with your partner about these feelings because while, guilt is normal, it's not something that you have to carry around with you. And then also, don't be afraid to seek professional help. I am biased as a clinical social worker, but, fertility concerns, especially those related to a cancer diagnosis, we already know cause emotional distress for yourself and for your partner. At times, you might need to ask for help, and that is okay. So, along the lines of talking about the fertility conversation, the fertility talk is really talking about the possibility of infertility and uncertainty. So often young women are diagnosed at a more advanced stage of ovarian cancer because symptoms often resemble other health conditions. I hear this time and time again. While it is rare that young adult women are diagnosed with ovarian cancer, we know that it happens. And when it does, it tends to be advanced, which seems really unfair, but it's so important that, we continue to raise awareness around these issues so that we can teach other women how to know the signs. And again, while it's rare, it's more likely that these women might need immediate surgery or treatment that might not provide the opportunity for fertility preservation. And for other young women undergoing treatment for ovarian cancer, infertility may not be immediately known. I did say that earlier. You might have to go through your entire treatment process before finding out that you're infertile or before finding out that there's a possibility that you can conceive naturally. This can be extremely distressing in terms of loss of identity, or loss of identity as a parent. Think about if you're someone who always saw themselves as a mother, then what does that say about you and your identity moving forward, right? We know that these things can shift and change, but I also recognize that there is a sense of grief and a loss of sense of self when these things are taken away from us. Some experience loss of hope for the future and future biological children, very normal. These feelings can lead to increased feelings of isolation, especially for those with a limited support system. Now, I just wanted to put a little slide on navigating family planning, although it really can use its own presentation. But I want to just really make you all aware that I know that some of the more expensive options for family planning are not, you know, necessarily realistic. Okay. For those that struggle with fertility or unable to have biological children, there are different family planning options. But, again, I recognize that these are expensive, which as adoption or surrogacy, these costs range from, you know, 10,000 to $50,000, sometimes even more, and many of us do not have that type of financial support. But there are some organizations, and I'll put them on a later slide, that help with grants towards family planning, especially for young adults. For those that are at risk of infertility, it is really important to communicate with your oncologist to seek consultation from a fertility specialist so that they can assist in navigating next steps for you. And here are some things that I've heard from clients. I just mentioned this idea of grieving the loss of fertility. It's so important. I lost my ability to have children before I even knew I wanted them. It all happened so fast. There was no time to freeze my eggs. I had an emergency hysterectomy at 25, and now I will never have children. How will I tell my future partner that I will never be able to have a biological child? So, here are some things that I really want to communicate about the importance of grieving the loss of your fertility, if that's something that you must do. My first tip would be give yourself permission to feel. Allow yourself time to grieve the loss and feel the sadness and the anger that may come along with, grieving your infertility and grieving the opportunity to have a child. Okay. Find a new way to express these feelings. You can scream into a pillow. You can punch a pillow if you need to, or a punching bag. Express your anger. Keep a journal. All of these things can help. Communication is really important. If your friends and family have been kept in the dark, it might be helpful to educate them about what you've been going through. Remember that this is an opportunity to offer insight, how and explain how certain comments, though innocent and unintentional, may be sensitive. Keep in mind that the loss of fertility can take a large toll on relationships. The need to steer clear of certain functions like baby showers, birthdays, family dinners can become primal, often causing unspoken resentment or feelings of inadequacy. So give yourself permission to decline these invitations, or at least, have a good cry afterwards if you decide to attend. So just keep in mind that by being connected, by sharing your truth and your experience with family and friends, it can really offer that insight. Teamwork. If you're in a relationship, help support one another. The loss of fertility is challenging, and it's a challenging situation that can bring many ups and downs, and that change from day to day. This means that partners and spouses or potential partners will not always feel the same feelings at the same time. This is totally normal. Working as a team and finding ways to stay connected, like going for a walk, holding hands, sharing a meal together, is really important. And my last tip would be get support. Remember that you're not alone. For some, the loss of fertility may seem secondary to cancer, but for others, it's just as devastating. At times, these losses go unnoticed, which only adds to feelings of isolation. So, as difficult as it is to remember, there are people out there who want to help. Finding somewhere to talk with people who understand, whether through friends, family, professional counseling, or support groups, can help you feel less alone and build hope for the future that lies ahead. And, I had just mentioned a little bit about coping with feelings of isolation, and often all of these challenges that I've spoken about today can really lead us into an isolating place. So I wanted to share this quote by Teddy Roosevelt: "Comparison is the thief of joy." Now, you might have heard this before, but it's more true now. And the reason why I say this is because young adults, and especially during this age where most things are virtual or through social media and online, it's so important to remind yourself that your experience is your own and no other experience of someone else can really compare to what you're going through. And oftentimes, when we do make that comparison, we lose a sense of happiness created by our own individual journey. So it's really common to feel isolated as a young adult with ovarian cancer. I hope that you've heard that theme, throughout this presentation so far. As this diagnosis is rare in young women, it can be difficult to find others who understand your experience, which is why I bet a lot of you are attending this national conference in the first place. Coping with the side effects of ovarian cancer can create additional feelings of isolation, especially as they relate to infertility, which we have gone over a little bit. So, I created this short support checklist for you all to kind of just check in and see, how am I doing with support? So, the first one is, do you have a counselor or therapist? Now, while this is not always necessary, you don't need to be struggling with mental illness in order to reach out for support through a counselor or a therapist. It's really important to find someone that understands your experience and that can hear you out, without judgment. Okay. My next question would be, are you in a support group? Whether that be a virtual support group that meets through, video chat, or an online support group that's like a message board, have you taken that step to connect to other young women who are experiencing something similar? Do you have strong support from your medical team? Now, I know this can be a triggering question, especially for those that have trouble communicating with their medical team or feel that, you know, their doctors often rush through their appointments or they're unable to get the questions answered that they need. But this is an important piece as well. Having a medical team that understands your symptoms and what you're going through, it really is the foundation of managing some of the side effects, whether it be short term or long term of treatment. And it's really important to take that step to find a medical team and a provider that you're comfortable with. Do you have at least one go to person for those bad days? And when I think about a go to person, for me, that means someone that that regardless you can call or reach out to, text, email, whatever it may be, and they will answer. Do you have at least one person in your life that you can go to for support? Do you have a cancer buddy? This could also be a peer mentor. There are plenty of organizations that will match you with someone else who is around the same age as you or has the same diagnosis or similar, and that you can talk to for peer support. There are a lot of organizations that offer this, and I'm happy to give resources as needed. Have you met other young adults with cancer? Now, that kind of goes along with, have you been in a support group or do you have a cancer buddy? But some support groups are not young adult specific. So I just wanted to also check in to see, have you met other young adults specifically that have had cancer? Because that can really decrease feelings of isolation as well. So here are some resources that I wanted to share with you and talk a little bit about. I labeled this title "What's Next" because there is always something coming in the future, always steps to take, and there are always resources that you can connect to. So I just want you to remember that you don't have to experience this alone. First and foremost, CancerCare can help. We do provide free support group counseling, case management services, financial assistance, educational programs, and individual counseling to those in New York and New Jersey. Our other programs are national. And then, of course, the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance. They do have a peer support program called Woman to Woman, which is a program that pairs gynecological cancer patients with trained volunteer mentors who provide one on one emotional support and mentoring. You may have also heard of the Live Strong Foundation. Now, they have a great fertility program that's dedicated to providing reproductive information, resources, financial support to survivors whose cancer and its treatment present risks to their fertility. I also wanted to mention First Ascents, which is a great organization that provides life changing outdoor adventures to young adults impacted by cancer and other serious health conditions. For those that don't know about First Ascents, they go on a bunch of adventure trips every year. I know that they're continuing to do these trips on a smaller scale despite the pandemic with all, COVID-19 precautions in place. And then also, Stupid Cancer Foundation, a huge organization in the young adult community, offers a lifeline to adolescents and young adult cancer community by connecting them to age appropriate resources and peers who get it. So, if we were in person, I would be doing some of these exercises with you and providing a space to, process your answers and things like that. But I did want to leave these here for you today to see if you can do them on your own. I just wanted to share a quote. Society does not easily accommodate a person's transition from patienthood. Now, that might resonate with some of you, especially for those that are transitioning from in treatment to post treatment and trying to get back to your lives. This might particularly ring true. So, we talked a little bit before about creating your own narrative around your cancer experience. So, this exercise is kind of a free write journaling exercise. And I really want you to think about what are the stories you tell yourself about your cancer experience. Now, by really writing this down and creating the space for you to create your narrative, then you'll have some foundation for disclosure. Oftentimes, those that struggle with disclosure struggle with this idea that they can't put their own experience into words that people will understand, right? So this is the first step. This is your this is your opportunity to create that narrative that you're comfortable with. And this is another exercise, again, that if we were doing this in person, it would be a little bit more fun to discuss some of your answers. But this is an exercise about identity. We really want to think about who I am before cancer and who I am after cancer. So, first, I would like you to write down three answers to the question, who am I? Okay. These can be positive or negative, and they can do with body image, beliefs, personality traits, things that you do. Just think about who am I again before cancer. And then I want you to take a moment to think about how cancer has affected those answers. Are your answers the same if you were to answer them now? And how has cancer affected the things that are most meaningful to you? Now, the reason I would like you to, participate in this identity exercise is because earlier we were talking about not only the cancer narrative, but how the cancer narrative impacts your identity and how you see yourself. And that really does tie into body image, sexuality, intimacy, ways that you connect with your partner. It all has to do with your own worldview and your own perspective and sense of self. And doing some of these exercises can really open up different opportunities to share your story. And here's just a list of references if you're interested in any of the information that I shared with you today. I know that was a lot, and I really just wanted to thank all of you for being with me today and following along with this presentation on young adult concerns for ovarian cancer patients. There's a lot more where that comes from, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll make sure that they get to me. Thank you so much for having me today.